Hi, so another Mrs. H Psychology. This time it is for paper 1, attachment again, and this was the exam question, evaluate research into early attachment. Okay, so for my mock, we just narrowed this right down to a 6-marker, a very small, like a mini essay question. So there's lots more research to watch if you have a look at Mrs. H Psychology, the attachment playlist, and look for the mind map on influence of early attachments. I outline the whole topic, but this question is literally just this. It's actually asking us to evaluate some research, and it's a mini essay. Okay, in order to do that, it's probably worth you just including a little bit of information about the research. So I would recommend that you refer to Hazen and Schaefer. So their love quiz, put in some details, 620 participants, assessing their attachment type and their general love experiences. So try to outline a tiny bit of that. You probably don't need this, but useful for revision purposes. Okay, so we could include that instead maybe. So something about the research. Be careful, there's conflicting information about type C and type A in some of the textbooks, and this is correct. Okay, so we're now going on, having done a tiny little bit about the actual research. Let's go on to evaluate it. So we need to make sure that we are outlining and really stating very clearly a problem. So for example, one problem is that the research is correlational, and obviously we know, and your standard response is it shows a relationship, not a causal link. But really I recommend that you develop that a little bit. So here it's showing a relationship between their attachment type and their adult romantic relationships, but it's not showing that that thing causes the other or vice versa, and it could be another factor that is the cause of that. For example, it could be divorce in the family or something like that. Okay, or you could state another problem was that Hazen and Schaefer used a volunteer sample and they were self-reporting. Obviously that means there's going to be bias. For example, develop that people will give a subjective view of their childhood or their adult relationships, and therefore without that objectivity it does limit its scientific value, or you could say it limits its validity. Okay, so make sure you don't just stop at the end of the first little bit, develop it in order to get your second mark. Going on, other examples we could use. Another problem is over the fact that attachment types are still typically assessed using Ainsworth's strange situation, and we recognise faults with that. So for example, there's cultural bias, and it's supposed to test the internal working model of an attachment, but it's actually just assessing the attachment of a child and that particular person at that particular time. So there are problems with it. Or we could put in contradictory findings. So for example, Zimmerman found the attachment style didn't predict adult attachments, and other child life events were more useful in that prediction, e.g. divorce in the family. So I've included those. You don't need all of those for this particular 6-marker, but if you had an extensive, for example, an essay question, you would. We would also want to include, for a more extensive answer, more extensive marks, some support for it. However, on the other hand, what's useful from this research is that it may help to identify children with poor attachment types at a very young age, so for example at school, and therefore extra support can be provided from other adults, which means early intervention to prevent perpetuation really of those poor attachments, so those people going on into adulthood with a poor internal working model. Or we could say support in terms of the reliability. So for example, McCarthy, 40 women were assessed as children, and those assessed as secure and then reassessed later as adults had good relationships, romantic relationships that is, whereas insecure avoidant had poor relationships, for example linked to having deviant partners. So it shows the reliability of continuity theory. So in order to make sure you secure your marks, develop, really expand on the problem or the support. I've just put in there a tiny little bit of extra that you could have. So this is really building you up to a proper full essay question. Okay, so you could just pick some of that material for your 6-marker.